To understand the absolute magnitude of the betrayal, you first need to understand the suffocating, inescapable mythology of my younger sister, Chloe. In our family, Chloe wasn't just the youngest child, she was an event. She was a localized celestial phenomenon around whom the rest of us were simply expected to orbit. I am 31 years old now. I've spent the better part of the last decade clawing my way up the corporate ladder at a mid-sized logistics firm, surviving on lukewarm coffee, sheer stubbornness, and the unwavering support of my husband, Mark. Together, we have two beautiful, exhausting, deeply chaotic children. Leo, who is 5 and possesses the energy of a small, localized tornado, and Mia, who is 3 and has already perfected the art of emotional manipulation via puppy dog eyes. We are a standard, dual-income, perpetually exhausted modern family. We live in a nice, albeit heavily mortgaged, 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. We are doing fine, but fine requires an immense, grinding amount of daily effort. Chloe, on the other hand, is 24 and has never exerted a measurable ounce of effort in her entire life. She was the surprise baby, born 7 years after me, right when our parents, Richard and Barbara, had finally settled into a comfortable routine. From the moment the ultrasound confirmed her existence, I was relegated from beloved daughter to capable older sister, a title that functionally meant I was the unpaid assistant manager of Chloe's life. When Chloe was a toddler and threw screaming tantrums in the grocery store, my mother would look at her with tear-filled, adoring eyes and whisper about how spirited and passionate she was. When I was a toddler and threw a tantrum, I was promptly carried to the car and told to stop embarrassing the family. This dynamic only calcified as we grew older. Chloe was the golden child, the untouchable saint. If she brought home a report card painted with C's and D's, my parents blamed the public school system for failing to accommodate her unique learning style. When I brought home straight A's, I got a brief nod and a reminder not to let my grades slip. Chloe's life was an endless parade of sponsored trips funded by the bank of mom and dad, half-finished degrees she abandoned, because she wasn't feeling creatively fulfilled, and a highly curated Instagram presence where she posted pictures of herself doing beach yoga with captions about inner peace and veganism. She was, to put it mildly, infuriating, but she was also untouchable. To criticize Chloe in front of our parents was to invite a dramatic, weeping monologue from our mother about how hard the world is for sensitive souls, and a stern lecture from our father about familial loyalty. So, I learned to keep my mouth shut. I smiled at the family dinners, I liked her heavily filtered photos, and I kept my distance. That was, until the childcare crisis of last year. Mark and I had reached a breaking point. My firm had finally offered me the senior director position I had been killing myself to get for 3 years. It came with a substantial pay bump, stock options, and a corner office. It also came with a mandatory expectation of 50-hour work weeks and occasional travel. Mark, a structural engineer, was already in the middle of overseeing a massive downtown development project that kept him on site from dawn until dusk. We desperately needed full-time childcare. Our piecemeal system of dropping the kids at various preschools, begging our neighbors for favors, and burning through all our paid time off was no longer sustainable. We spent 3 agonizing weeks interviewing professional nannies. The process was a nightmare. The agencies charged exorbitant finder's fees, and the candidates were either wildly out of our budget, demanding a salary that rivaled my own, or they gave off such bizarre, unsettling vibes that I wouldn't have trusted them to watch a houseplant, let alone my children. We were drowning in stress, sitting at the kitchen table late one Sunday night, staring at a spreadsheet filled with terrifying numbers, when my phone rang. It was a group FaceTime from my parents. "Sarah, darling?" my mother trilled, her face taking up the entire screen. Behind her, I could see the familiar, slightly faded floral wallpaper of my childhood home. "We have the most wonderful news." "Did Dad finally retire?" I asked, rubbing my temples, trying to stave off a mounting tension headache. "Better," my mother declared, stepping aside to reveal Chloe. Chloe was wearing an oversized, ethically sourced linen sweater and holding a mug of herbal tea with both hands, looking like a stock photo for Serenity. "Hey, sis," Chloe said. her voice dripping with that breathy, affected tone she used whenever she was about to perform a good deed. Mom and Dad were telling me about your little nanny situation. And I just thought, family has to step up for family. The universe is telling me I need to ground myself, and what better way to do that than by spending time with my precious niece and nephew? I stared at the screen, my sleep-deprived brain struggling to process the words. You want a nanny? For Leo and Mia? Yes, Chloe beamed. I've paused my online boutique for a while. I need a detox from the hustle culture. And I wouldn't dream of charging you, Sarah. Consider it my gift to you. You work so hard, and you deserve a break. Plus, I just love those little munchkins so much. My mother was literally dabbing tears from her eyes with a tissue. Isn't she just an angel, Sarah? Giving up her time, her youth, to help her big sister. I don't know many girls her age who would make such a selfless sacrifice. Every instinct in my body, every hard-won, cynical, older sister survival instinct, was screaming at me to decline. Chloe didn't know the first thing about children. The last time she babysat Leo, he was 2, and she had let him eat an entire box of Oreos because she didn't want to stifle his intuitive eating habits. I looked at Mark, sitting across the table. I expected him to shake his head, to mouth the word no, but Mark just looked defeated. He pointed a pen at the terrifying bottom line of our budget spreadsheet. Free childcare from a family member meant we wouldn't have to pull from our savings. It meant we could actually afford the mortgage on my new salary without hyperventilating every month. I took a deep breath, silencing the alarm bells ringing in my head. Chloe, that is incredibly generous of you. Are you absolutely sure? It's 5 days a week, 8 to 6. It's not easy. Oh, please, Chloe laughed, waving a hand dismissively. How hard can it be? We'll do arts and crafts, we'll bake, we'll go on nature walks. It'll be a beautiful journey for all of us. And just like that, the trap was set. For the first 3 weeks, it was, quite frankly, a miracle. Every morning at 7:45 a.m., Chloe would breeze through our front door, holding an iced matcha latte, looking infuriatingly refreshed. She would greet the kids with overly enthusiastic hugs, sing them a little good morning song, and shoo Mark and me out the door. Go conquer the corporate world, she would chirp. We've got a magical day of sensory play planned. While I was at work, sitting in endless strategy meetings, my phone would buzz with updates. A perfectly framed photo of Leo and Mia finger painting on the patio. A short video of them laughing as Chloe chased them through the sprinklers. An Instagram story, which my mother invariably shared to her own Facebook page of Chloe baking gluten-free muffins with the kids, captioned, Auntie duties, everything else, pouring into the next generation, family first, aunt life blessed. When Mark and I came home at 6, the house was mostly clean, the kids were fed, and Chloe was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. We were so blindingly grateful, so relieved to be freed from the crushing anxiety of the nanny search, that we practically worshipped her. We bought her expensive dinners on the weekends. I slipped her gift cards to Sephora and Lululemon. Mark even started referring to her as Saint Chloe without a hint of irony. But then, the cracks began to show. Small things at first, microfractures in the perfect facade. It started in the second month. Mark and I had managed to secure a rare Saturday night date, leaving the kids with a neighborhood babysitter. Chloe, naturally, needed her weekends to recharge her spiritual batteries. We had gone out for a nice steak dinner, and when we returned, we decided to pour a nightcap. Mark opened the glass doors of our small, curated liquor cabinet in the dining room. He reached for his prized bottle of Macallan 18-year-old single malt scotch. It was a bottle his father had given him for his 30th birthday, and Mark treated it with near-religious reverence. He only ever drank a single finger of it on major holidays or anniversaries. Hey, Mark said, his brow furrowing as he held the heavy crystal bottle up to the light. Did you pour some of this while I was out of town last week? I walked over. The bottle, which had been 3/4 full the last time I saw it, was now hovering just above the halfway mark. At least 4 solid pours were missing. No, I said, frowning. You know I don't drink scotch, it tastes like expensive dirt to me, I haven't touched it. Mark looked genuinely baffled. That's weird, maybe. Maybe some of it evaporated. Evaporated through a cork? I asked skeptically. We didn't immediately jump to conclusions. It seemed too absurd. Why would Chloe, who publicly claimed alcohol lowered her vibrational frequency, be secretly chugging premium aged scotch? We brushed it off, assuming we simply hadn't remembered how much was left. But a week later, I noticed the smell. I had been working late on a Tuesday, finalizing a quarterly report. I got home around 8 in the evening. The kids were already asleep, and Mark was in the kitchen doing the dishes. I dragged my exhausted body upstairs, desperate for a hot shower and my bed. I walked into the master bedroom, kicked off my heels, and collapsed face first onto the mattress. As my face pressed into the Egyptian cotton duvet, my nostrils were assaulted by a scent so aggressively potent it made my eyes water. It wasn't the smell of our usual lavender laundry detergent. It wasn't my high-end Tom Ford perfume, and it certainly wasn't Mark's subtle cedarwood cologne. It was a cloying, sickly sweet, hyper-artificial scent. It smelled like spun sugar, cheap vanilla extract, and synthetic strawberries. It was the exact, unmistakable olfactory signature of a teenage girl heading to a middle school dance in 2008. It smelled like cheap perfume. I sat up, confused, sniffing the air. The smell wasn't just on the duvet. It was soaked into the pillows. It lingered heavily in the ambient air of the room, mingling with a faint, underlying odor that I couldn't quite place, something sharp and slightly musky, like stale sweat and… was that weed? I walked downstairs, my mind racing. "Mark," I said, leaning against the kitchen island, "did you have someone in our bedroom today?" He looked up from the sink, soapy water dripping from his hands, looking at me like I had lost my mind. "What? No, I was at the site all day. I got home at 6, same time as Chloe left. Why?" "Go upstairs and smell our bed," I told him. He dried his hands and went upstairs. He came back down 2 minutes later, looking deeply disturbed. "It smells like a cheap strip club in there. What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I said, a cold knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. The next morning, when Chloe arrived, I tried to casually bring it up as she was making her morning matcha. "Hey, Chloe," I said, keeping my tone light, almost conversational. "Did you happen to go into our bedroom yesterday? I noticed a really strong perfume smell in there last night." Chloe didn't even blink, she didn't pause her stirring. Her face remained a mask of serene innocence. "Oh yeah, I hope you don't mind. I was putting away a load of your laundry, and I think one of my essential oil rollers might have leaked a tiny bit in my pocket while I was carrying the basket. It's a new blend. Ylang ylang and sweet orange. Very restorative." I stared at her. Essential oil? That scent was pure, uncut mall kiosk body spray, and it hadn't just been on a basket of laundry, it had permeated the mattress. But she looked at me with those wide, unblinking, perfectly mascaraed eyes, daring me to challenge her. "Right," I said slowly. "Well, please don't use those oils in our room anymore." It gave me a terrible headache. "Of course, babe," she chirped. "Boundary respected, love that for us." I left for work feeling physically ill. Something was profoundly wrong. I am an analytical person by nature. My job requires me to look at disparate data points, identify patterns, and foresee logistical failures before they happen. The data points in my own home were suddenly flashing bright red. The missing alcohol. The inexplicable, lingering sense in a room she had no business being in. And then, there were the children. It was subtle, a gradual shift in their behavior that Mark and I had initially chalked up to developmental phases. Leo, who was usually a boisterous, talkative little boy, had started becoming withdrawn in the mornings. When he heard Chloe's key in the front door, his shoulders would slump. He stopped running to greet her. Mia had developed a nervous habit of chewing on her fingernails, and she had started having night terrors again, waking up screaming about being trapped in the dark. One evening, while I was giving Leo a bath, I asked him gently, "Hey, buddy. What did you and Auntie Chloe do today? Did you go to the park?" Leo stared at the soapy water, pushing a plastic boat back and forth. He wouldn't look at me. "No," he muttered. "Did you do arts and crafts?" "No." "Well, what did you do?" Leo looked up, his little face entirely serious. "We stayed in the loud room." I frowned. "The loud room? You mean the living room with the TV?" He shook his head violently. "No, the playroom. Auntie Chloe says we have to stay in the playroom until the sun goes down. She locks the door so the monsters don't get us. She says if we make noise, the monsters will come. so we just watched the iPad all day. The knot in my stomach tightened into a vice. The playroom was at the very back of the house, far away from the front door and the master bedroom. We had put a lock on the outside of the door months ago to keep the kids out of it when we were cleaning up toys, but we never, ever locked them inside. "Leo," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Does Auntie Chloe stay in the playroom with you?" "No," he whispered, looking terrified that he was breaking a rule by telling me. "Auntie Chloe goes upstairs, she has loud friends over, the house shakes, we're not allowed out. Even when I have to go potty really bad." My blood ran instantly, freezing cold. I didn't tell Mark right away. I knew Mark. He was a protector. If I told him what Leo had said, Mark would have physically thrown Chloe out of the house the next morning, and the resulting explosion would have shattered my entire extended family. Chloe would deny it. She would cry. She would say Leo was making things up, that he had an overactive imagination. My parents would immediately side with her, accusing us of being ungrateful monsters who were trying to destroy a poor, selfless girl's reputation just because we were stressed from our jobs. I couldn't just confront her. I needed absolute, undeniable, irrefutable proof. I needed to know exactly what was happening in my house while I was breaking my back at an office to pay for it. The next day, on my lunch break, I sat in my car in the corporate parking lot and ordered $400 worth of high-definition, stealth, Wi-Fi-enabled nanny cameras from an electronics retailer. I paid extra for overnight shipping. When the package arrived on a Saturday, I waited until Chloe had left for her spiritual retreat weekend, sent Mark to the park with the kids, and went to work. I felt like a spy, paranoid and sweating, as I installed the tiny lenses. The technology is terrifyingly good these days. I replaced a functional smoke detector in the playroom ceiling with one that had a 1080p camera hidden in the grill. I placed an innocent-looking digital alarm clock on my bedside table in the master bedroom, the dark glass hiding a wide-angle lens. I tucked a small black cube camera between the books on the shelf in the living room, ensuring a clear view of the front door and the stairs. I downloaded the encrypted app to my phone, synced the devices, and tested the feeds. The video was crystal clear. The audio picked up even the faintest rustle of fabric. The trap was fully armed. Now all I had to do was wait. The waiting was a psychological torture, unlike anything I had ever experienced. Sunday passed in a blur of anxiety. I barely slept. When Monday morning arrived, and Chloe breezed through the door with her iced latte and her fake, sunny smile, it took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to physically shove her back out onto the porch. I kissed the kids goodbye, lingering a little longer than usual, whispering to Leo that everything was going to be okay. I drove to the office in silence, my phone burning a hole in my purse. I waited until 10 o'clock a.m. I locked the door to my corner office, drew the blinds, sat at my desk, and opened the app. My hands were shaking so violently, I almost dropped the phone. I tapped on the playroom feed first. The room was brightly lit. Leo and Mia were sitting on the foam mat on the floor. Between them was a single, large bowl of dry Cheerios and an iPad propped up on a plastic stand, playing some mind-numbing cartoon at low volume. The door was shut. I watched the timestamp tick by. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, they didn't move. They just sat there, glassy-eyed, eating dry cereal. Occasionally, Mia would walk over to the locked door, jiggle the handle, whimper a little, and sit back down. It broke my heart into 1,000 jagged pieces. I took a shuddering breath and switched the feed to the living room camera. At 10:15 a.m., the front door unlocked. Chloe walked in. She was no longer wearing her wholesome, oversized linen sweater. She was wearing a skin-tight, neon pink athletic set. She was carrying a massive black duffel bag and a collapsed metal tripod. Following right behind her were two men. They were not people I had ever seen before. They looked to be in their mid-20s. One had a neck tattoo, the other was wearing a backwards baseball cap and carrying a large, professional-looking lighting rig. They were laughing loudly, tracking mud onto my Persian rug. "Keep it down," Chloe hissed, though she was smiling. "The brats are in the back, just head straight upstairs, I'll get the props." I watched in paralyzed, nauseating horror as my younger sister led two strange men up the stairs toward my private sanctuary. My finger hovered over the screen. I almost couldn't bring myself to tap the icon for the master bedroom camera. I felt physically sick, a wave of bile rising in my throat, but I had to know. I tapped the screen. The feed buffered for a second, and then the image resolved. My bedroom had been transformed into a grotesque makeshift studio. The tripod was set up at the foot of my bed, an expensive DSLR camera mounted on top of it. A massive ring light bathed the room in a harsh, clinical white glow. Chloe was standing in the center of the room. She unzipped the black duffel bag and dumped the contents onto my pristine white duvet. Out tumbled an assortment of lingerie, terrifyingly high stilettos, various silicone objects that I refused to name, and several bottles of cheap liquor. The next 3 hours of footage were a descent into a specific kind of domestic hell. I sat at my desk, tears streaming down my face silently, recording every single second of it to a secure cloud drive. I watched my saintly, angelic younger sister, the girl my mother praised for her pure heart, use my marital bed to film highly explicit, multi-person adult content. I watched them drink Mark's expensive scotch straight from the bottle, spilling it onto the rugs. I watched them smoke out the window, filling the room with the thick haze of marijuana. I watched the men throw their sweaty clothes onto my pillows. The audio was the worst part. Chloe wasn't just participating, she was directing. She was ruthless, barking orders, complaining about the lighting, shouting at the men to make it look more authentic for the subscribers. She talked about her OnlyFans tier goals. Between takes, she sat naked on my duvet, scrolling through her phone, laughing about how stupid her family was to give her a free house to shoot in every day. My sister is such a corporate drone. I heard her say clearly to one of the men as she took a drag from a vape pen. She literally pays my parents' mortgage sometimes, and they still love me more because I play the sweet little baby role. It's pathetic, but hey, free studio space, right? At 2 p.m., the shoot wrapped up. The men dressed, grabbed their gear, and left. Chloe spent 30 minutes lazily spraying a massive bottle of Victoria's Secret Vanilla Fantasy Body spray all over the room to mask the smell of sweat, weed, and whatever else had happened. Then, she changed back into her oversized linen sweater, went downstairs, unlocked the playroom, and filmed a 10-second video of the kids for Instagram. I closed the app, laid my head down on my desk, and let out a sob that tore from the very bottom of my lungs. My initial, primal instinct was violence. I wanted to leave the office, drive home at 90 miles an hour, drag her out of my house by her perfectly highlighted hair, and throw her onto the front lawn in front of the neighbors. I wanted to scream until my throat bled, but as the blind rage slowly subsided, it was replaced by something much colder, much harder, and infinitely more dangerous. I am a logistical planner. I look at systems. The system of my family was fundamentally broken because it relied on the illusion of Chloe's perfection. If I just kicked her out, she would spin the narrative. She was a master manipulator. She would go crying to my parents, claiming Mark had made a pass at her, and I was jealous. She would claim she was running a harmless fashion blog, and I misunderstood. She would turn herself into the victim, as she had done every single day of her life, and I would be the villain. No, kicking her out wasn't enough. I didn't just need to remove her from my house, I needed to annihilate her reputation. I needed to burn the mythology of the golden child to the ground in such a spectacular, undeniable fashion that nothing could ever grow from the ashes. I needed an audience. I looked at the calendar on my desk. It was November 3rd. Thanksgiving was exactly 3 weeks away. This year, it was my turn to host the entire extended family. My parents, both sets of grandparents, 3 sets of aunts and uncles, a half-dozen judgmental cousins, and even the local pastor who had baptized us both as infants were all scheduled to gather in my living room. 28 people in total. A cold, dark smile crept across my face. I wiped my tears. I wiped the hard drive. I began to plan. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in psychological endurance. I deserve an Academy Award for the performance I delivered. Every morning, I smiled at Chloe. I asked her about her spiritual journey. I listened to her complain about how exhausting it was to be so empathetic all the time. I thanked her profusely for her immense sacrifice. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Chloe," I would say, forcing a sickeningly sweet tone. You are literally the glue holding this family together. I know, right? She would sigh, tossing her hair. It's a heavy burden, but the universe gives its hardest battles to its strongest soldiers. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was meticulously preparing for war. I told Mark everything. I sat him down one night when Chloe was gone, poured him a massive glass of what remained of his scotch, and showed him a heavily redacted, 3-minute highlight reel of the footage. I only showed him the logistical betrayal, the strangers in the house, the kids locked in the playroom with the iPad. I spared him the hardcore explicit content, but he saw the ring lights, the lingerie, and the blatant disrespect for our home. Mark went dead pale, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth would shatter. He stood up, pacing the room, his fists balled. I'm going to her apartment right now. I'm going to tear the door off the hinges. No, I commanded, grabbing his arm. Sit down. If you do that, she wins. She plays the victim. We do this my way. We do it on Thanksgiving. I laid out the plan. Mark, to his eternal credit, took a deep breath, nodded, and agreed to follow my lead. We spent the next 3 weeks operating like a covert ops team. We secretly hired a premium, fully vetted nanny service to start the Monday after Thanksgiving. On the days I worked from home, I hid my car down the street, snuck in through the back gate, and watched from the guest room as she brought men in. I compiled hours of undeniable evidence. I edited a final 10-minute video file. I titled it Thanksgiving Presentation MP4. I also bought a brand new top-of-the-line mattress and kept it hidden in the garage, ready to replace the contaminated one the second she was gone. Finally, the day arrived. Thanksgiving Thursday. The air was crisp, the house smelled of roasting turkey, sage stuffing, and simmering cranberry sauce. The dining table was extended to its maximum length, covered in my best white linens, gleaming silverware, and crystal goblets. By 2 p.m., the house was packed. The noise was deafening, the clinking of glasses, the loud, booming laughter of my uncles, the gentle murmurs of my grandmothers. My parents were holding court in the center of the living room, looking incredibly smug and proud. And right beside them, basking in the adoration, was Chloe. She was wearing a modest, high-necked, floral prairie dress that made her look like a pioneer saint. She had her hair braided simply. She was holding a glass of sparkling cider and regaling my Aunt Susan with tales of her selfless dedication to my children. It's about being present, you know?" Chloe was saying, her voice carrying across the room. "Sarah and Mark are so caught up in the material world, the corporate rat race, they barely have time to breathe. I just felt called to step in and provide a nurturing, holistic environment for Leo and Mia. Children need a pure aura to thrive." My mother sighed dramatically, placing a hand over her heart. "We are just so blessed. Chloe has always had the soul of an angel. She sacrifices so much of her own life for others." I caught Mark's eye across the room. He was leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen, holding a beer. He gave me a single, imperceptible nod. It was time. I clinked my fork against a crystal water glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the chatter. Slowly, the 28 people in the room fell silent, turning their attention to me. "Thank you, everyone," I said, my voice steady, projecting clearly. I walked to the center of the living room, standing in front of our massive, 75-inch Samsung Smart TV. Before we sit down to eat this incredible meal, I wanted to take a moment to express some gratitude. My father smiled warmly. "A toast, Sarah, wonderful idea." "Yes, a toast of sorts," I continued, making direct eye contact with Chloe. She smiled back, looking incredibly pleased with herself, clearly expecting a public declaration of my undying gratitude. This past year has been challenging for Mark and me. Balancing careers and family is difficult. But as my mother just pointed out, we have been incredibly fortunate to have Chloe step in and watch the kids. "Oh, stop, you're going to make me cry," Chloe simpered, waving a hand. "No, I insist," I said. In fact, words really can't express what Chloe has been doing in this house for the past 2 months. Mere words don't do it justice. So, I decided to put together a little video presentation to really showcase her unique talents, her daily routine, to show everyone exactly how she spends her time while Mark and I are at work. My mother clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh, Sarah, how thoughtful, a little home movie." "Something like that," I said. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I swiped down, opened the screen mirroring menu, and tapped the living room TV. The massive screen behind me blinked to life, displaying my phone screen. Chloe's smile faltered slightly. A tiny, fleeting shadow of confusion crossed her face. I really think this will illuminate things for all of us, I said. I opened the video file, turned the volume on the surround sound system all the way up, and hit play. The room was dead silent as the video began. The first clip was from the playroom camera. It was timestamped 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. The footage was stark and undeniable. It showed Chloe physically grabbing a crying, terrified Leo by the arm, pushing him and a weeping Mia into the playroom. It showed her dropping a bowl of dry cereal on the floor, pointing a finger in Leo's face, and clearly shouting, "If you make one sound, the monsters will eat you." "Shut up." Then, she stepped out and the deadbolt locked with a loud, audible click that echoed through my living room speakers. The kids were left in the dim room, sobbing, pounding their little fists against the door. Gasps erupted around the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Sarah, what is this?" she stammered. Chloe went from flushed pink to a chalky, absolute white in a fraction of a second. "Turn it off," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Sarah, turn that off right now." "We're just getting to the good part, Auntie Chloe," I said coldly, stepping away from the TV. The video cut to the living room camera. 10:15 a.m. Chloe letting three strange men with camera equipment into the house. My father stood up, his face reddening. "Who are those men? Chloe, who are those men in Sarah's house?" Chloe couldn't speak. Her mouth was opening and closing like a suffocating fish. Then, the coup de grace. The video cut to the master bedroom camera. I had edited the footage meticulously. I didn't want to expose my extended family to straight pornography, but I needed to leave zero room for deniability. The footage showed Chloe in sheer, incredibly graphic lingerie. It showed the massive ring lights. It showed the tripods. It showed her passing around a blunt with the men on my bed. It showed her pouring my husband's $400 scotch down one of the men's throats. And then, the audio played. Loud, crystal clear, bouncing off the acoustic panels of my living room. "Make it look rougher, the subscribers love that fake stepsister crap. And don't spill the lube on the sheets, my idiot sister will notice the stain." "You think she knows?" one of the men asked. "Sarah, God no, she's clueless. She's practically paying me to use her house as a studio. The whole family thinks I'm Mother Teresa. Just keep quiet so the brats downstairs don't start screaming again." Pandemonium. Absolute, unfiltered, chaotic pandemonium. My grandmother shrieked and covered her face with her hands. The pastor spilled his coffee entirely down his shirt. My uncles were shouting, demanding to know what they were looking at. My mother, the woman who had spent 24 years defending this girl's every breath, let out a wail that sounded like a dying animal and literally collapsed onto the sofa, clutching her chest. "My baby. My sweet girl." "No, it's fake. Sarah, you made this. It's artificial intelligence. It's a deep fake. It's from the hidden cameras I installed 3 weeks ago, Mom.